Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world with self-care strategies from Chinese medicine. I'm your host, Brody Welch, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. If you're a frequent listener to A Healthy Curiosity, you know that I have basically a threefold mission for the show. I want to help demystify natural healing modalities that you may not be familiar with. I want to empower you to take care of yourself with self-care tips and share personal conversations about what it takes to be well in all levels in a busy world. Today's guest is Leilon Sang Weiss, and I think this conversation is going to hit on all three of those points. Li-Lan is a licensed acupuncturist practicing at the Armonia Holistic Health Clinic in Durham, North Carolina. She's been in private practice since 2005. She earned her Master of Science in Oriental Medicine degree from Southwest Acupuncture College, which is also my alma mater. Shout out to all the SWAC people who may be listening. Woohoo! Li-Lan was at the Santa Fe campus while I went to school in Albuquerque. And for those of you who may not know what goes into a Chinese medicine degree, it's close to a 3,000-hour master's degree, about 1,000 of which are clinical hours, where we go over not only TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, but Japanese-style acupuncture, Chinese herbal medicine, Oriental physical therapy, nutrition, Tai Chi, Qigong, biomedicine, and relevant science. So we get all that, and she's got all that in her background. And then she went on to do some advanced Chinese medicine training in both pain relief and fertility. And in addition to Chinese medicine, Leilon has studied and now teaches the Arvigo Technique of Mayan Abdominal therapy. I'm super excited to be talking with her about the Arvigo Technique and its relationship to Chinese medicine on the show today. Now, here's a little disclaimer. As you listen to today's conversation, please bear in mind that no healing modality can guarantee any particular results on any particular timeline, nor should the information that you learn replace any individual medical advice or treatment. It's meant only to open a doorway to what's possible based on our experience as clinicians and from the experience of countless people who use traditional forms of medicine. So welcome to the show, Leilon.
Thank you so much, Brody. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you and share.
Oh, me too. Yay. So could you tell us a little bit about what got you interested in Chinese medicine in the first place?
Yes. I think I was in high school, and my uncle was studying a little bit about Chinese medicine. He was studying about 5 elements, and we were just having a conversation about what those elements were and, you know, how they're useful for looking at imbalances in the body. And at that time, I was looking at wanting to study medicine. I thought I wanted to do, conventional medical medicine, but at the same time, I'm of Taiwanese descent, and the knowledge of Chinese medicine is part of a lot of Asian people's lives. So I had this dual interest, and I thought going to college that I would end up being a physician. But when I really found out what that lifestyle was like in the United States, because I didn't grow up in the United States, I realized that kind of practice of medicine wasn't really what I thought it would be for me, and then the way I'd have to live and the study of that felt just not the right path. And so that led me to look into studying Chinese medicine in the United States after graduating from college. And that's how I found myself to Southwest Acupuncture College in Santa Fe. And I think I'm glad that I followed my heart and my intuition about what I wanted to do for a living, because the way I live is very important. That balance that I keep for myself is what also motivates me to help others. Got to work both ways for me, I realize.
Yeah, definitely. Right. You can't take care of other people unless you take care of yourself. And you really had that self-knowledge, it sounds like, at quite an early age. And do you grow up in Taiwan?
No, I lived there till age 4. And then my father worked in Central America, so I moved to Central America and spent elementary school to high school in Central America.
Wow. So you had a lot of different cultural influences on your world, and I imagine that really informs your view of medicine.
Yes, it does. So I kind of bring it all into my practice in different ways.
Wow, what a prescient and self-aware person you were from an early age to know that you wanted to get into medicine and help people, but weren't willing to have the kind of lifestyle that would just chew you up and spit you out. That's awesome. So how did you get interested in the Arvigo technique?
So in my first year in acupuncture school in Santa Fe, that was 2003, I heard from a friend that Rosita Arvigo was teaching the self-care class of Mayan Abdominal Health in Santa Fe. And I didn't get to take that class then, but the two things that attracted me that really stood out were the focus on the abdomen, and I was just starting to learn just how important all the organs are in the belly, and that you can treat the whole body through working with just the belly. And the second part of why this work stood out to me was because I lived 5 years in Guatemala, and the Mayan people were situated in Guatemala, southern Mexico, and I had visited a lot of those temples when I lived there. And I was just fascinated by the Mayan culture. And so there was this sort of mysterious draw for me to the Mayan healing work. And fast forward to my professional training, that's when I learned that just like in Chinese medicine, we study the physical body, the energetic body, and then the spiritual body. The Mayans also believed in the same principles of there's no separation between the physical body, the emotions, and then spirituality. And the neat thing...
I love that overlap. Sorry to interrupt, but yes, it is so cool when different traditions resonate with each other and overlap so neatly. I think it adds a layer of credibility to both when there is that overlap.
Yes, and I learned to sort of embrace the connection that the Mayans have with the natural world through working directly with live plants and water, through their spiritual healing practices. I felt that I received some of that through the Chinese medicine training, learning about the 5 elements and understanding body temperature and influences of the environment to the body. But the Mayan work, particularly as I studied with Rosita, gave me hands-on tools and very tactile, very sense-oriented tools to work with these elements. And that...
What are those tools?
So through Maya Spiritual Healing, which is also a course that's open to the public, we learn to do spiritual baths, which in essence is, how when you're little and it's summer and you're running outside with the sprinkler on, and kids would just laugh and giggle because the water's sprinkling all over the place and it looks really fun.
Well, I totally have that image in my mind as you talk about
and
it.
And the sun is shining through, right? And like rainbows, you could see the rainbows through the sprinkling of the water. Well, in essence, it's how to create a bath for oneself that is infused with your own gratitude, with your own prayer, with your gratitude to the water that you're using, to the plants like, basil and rosemary, really nice smelling plants, and asking this creation you're making to help you with whatever you'd like to cleanse from. And so it's your own personal ceremony. And then you go about and do a sprinkling of your energy field while you're also in a state of prayer. You bring in incense, so that can be a natural incense of one's choice. The Mayans like to use copal, which is a native resin to that area. It smells like frankincense very much. And so you have all these natural elements like that you're being surrounded with and being grateful for to help you with whatever you'd like to heal or clear or just wash away.
That sounds like a really accessible and beautiful ritual for people, like where you don't have to doesn't necessarily conflict with anybody's belief system necessarily, except for the fact that the natural world and our own bodies, minds, and spirits are connected.
Yeah, it's kind of bringing all of that in closer in our hurried lives, particularly here on the East Coast. And it's nice to have that just in my backyard with the herbs that I grow.
Beautiful. So could you describe the different components of the Arvigo technique?
Yes.
There's the spiritual dimension, and then there's the body work, and I'd love to know more.
Yep, there's the body work that a person who's interested in learning that work would first take the self-care training to learn the abdominal massage first for oneself and get an introduction of all the different topics that are covered. And the professional training would be learning the full massage. It'd be front of the belly and as well as the back. So includes the sacrum, the low back, knowing how to assess the ligaments around the tailbone, and understanding anatomy and physiology of both women and men is part of the training. Understanding anatomy and physiology of the digestive system. Knowing a little bit about the armor rings, the emotional armor rings of the body, or the chakra system of the body, and then also, practicing the self-care massage for oneself. Those are the aspects of what encompasses all the Arvigo techniques.
Sounds really in-depth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, but it's very accessible. And so even in a 2.5-day class, one can get an introduction to all of that. So that's what I like about it, too.
I confess to being fascinated by the abdomen. It's so in Chinese medicine, right, it's an area that we use for both diagnosis and treatment. We have these maps that, we palpate areas of hot and cold. We feel areas that feel tight and stuck versus empty when we touch them, and what's tender and what isn't, and all of that tells us something about what's going on internally. And sometimes we'll treat the abdomen itself, either with body work or acupuncture, but we can also go back and recheck points to see if our treatment did something. And there's so much that it is this little microcosm of the whole body. And then, of course, the whole gut-brain axis that allopathic medicine is just now waking up to, that there's as many neurons traveling from the gut to the brain, not taking orders from the brain, but giving information to the brain as there are in the spinal cord,
right,
which I think is fascinating. And we're just cluing into what information the gut might have for the brain. So there's a lot there, even just in Chinese medicine. What does the Arvigo technique add to our understanding of the gut?
So a big part of the Arvigo techniques is the massage, the abdomen massage, both the self-care massage as well as what the practitioner would do for the client. And for the Mayans, abdominal massage is something very, very commonly used still in Central America. And my attraction to it was because there was the massage component. And in Chinese medicine school, we did, study some tuina, shiatsu, but I was always doing massage growing up on my father. And so it was always very natural for me to use my hands that way. And this particular work, the Arvigo work, both enhanced my perception of what my hands can perceive underneath it. And so one, it was for my own personal sort of growth as a practitioner, where we use our fingers and hands a lot, and how to feel energy and to perceive what's going on underneath our fingers. But the other part was there is some information that I just didn't receive in Chinese medicine school. And one piece of that is the idea that the uterus has a particular position within the pelvic bowl where its optimum function can happen. And that was new to me. That all that piece of information was not something I had really studied through Chinese medicine. And so the idea that one could facilitate increased blood flow in and out of the reproductive organs through self-care massage was fascinating. And really,
so if someone did have a tilted uterus, what kinds of symptoms would that lead to? How would they know, or why did that stand out for you as important?
So a common one is dysmenorrhea, so painful menstruation or cramping menstruation with blood clots. And that can be very easily shifted within about one menstrual cycle with a woman doing her own self-care massage.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How can she learn how to do that?
Well, there's practitioners all over the United States, Europe, Australia, and the ArvigoTherapy.com website lists practitioners that have been trained either by Rosita Arvigo herself or the certified teachers of the Arvigo Institute. And so one can find practitioners, in a lot of cities throughout the country. And that's what I loved about incorporating this work is the empowerment aspect that it gives clients as well as people I talk to and friends. Because as practitioners, I've realized that over the years, I can only do so much, and that there's a lot that we all can do for ourselves. And it's sometimes providing the right information, the right motivation, all of that good stuff.
So it sounds like someone could see a practitioner and have a treatment, and then would they be given some self-care instructions as to what to do on their own?
Yes. So a big part of seeing an Arvigo practitioner is learning the abdominal self-care massage, as well as receiving the front and back. So the back body work includes assessing the sacrum, the tailbone, the low back. And an Arvigo practitioner also has some self-care tools to recommend. For example, you might have heard of vaginal steam, and that's a traditional Mayan technique, as well as one that's used also in Korea and in other parts of the world.
For people who may not be familiar, could you describe what that is?
Yes, I like to describe it as a facial steam, kind of like a facial steam, but for the pelvic area. So it generally involves having a chair with an opening, and a tent is created around the person sitting on this chair without, underwear on. It could be a man or it could be a woman. And then a pot of hot water where safe aromatic herbs have been simmered, and that pot of tea is slid underneath the seat, and one relaxes for about 20 minutes. So it's a pelvic steam, also called vaginal steam for women.
As you're describing it, I'm struck by what an amazing therapy that would be for people with what we would call cold in the uterus in Chinese medicine, right? If the idea that since we're connected to the exterior environment, when cold, that we always learned it as sports in shorts in acupuncture school, right? That girls running around in cold weather, that the vagina is an opening to the outside world, and that cold can come in and stagnate the energy of the reproductive system, causing a lot of pain and cramping and things like that. So it seems like it would be such good medicine for people.
Yeah, it seems, and that's why I think in Korea, which is pretty far north in the hemisphere, it's very common and popular. So.
Yeah. And in your own personal life, how has working with the abdominal therapy, how has that helped you? What changes have you noticed in your journey with it?
Once I started doing the professional training, that's when I really got into doing my own self-care massage, even though the entry level class was the 2.5-day class self-care. I remember that was a lot of information for me, and I was just processing it. And it wasn't until I decided to take the professional training that I thought, okay, let me really use this self-care massage on myself and see what happens. And
knowing that you were going to be using it on other people adds additional motivation to make sure you really got that down. Right. For so many of us, the wanting to help other people that finally gets us to buckle down on self-care, that is, I can relate to that.
Yeah. And first I realized how relaxing it is, and that's a big motivation for me for any self-care tool. It's like got to feel good.
Absolutely. It doesn't really feel like self-care if it feels like self-punishment.
Right, or it's too rigid, or like if I'm thinking, oh, I got to do this. So that was my first observation, and this was even before I knew how much the nervous system and the gut is there. And so that was like, wow, there's something here. And when I would do it on myself, I would feel like tingling in my feet, kind of similar to how when one receives acupuncture, there's that tingling sensation throughout the body. And I thought, wow, there's, more to this than I thought. And so I could feel the difference when I did it.
You're not just working on your abdomen. You're actually you could feel that was having an effect throughout your body.
Yeah. And I've always had like gas, bloating. I've always had kind of a sensitive digestive system ever since I was little. So that allowed me to explore, what I was feeling underneath my hands when I would do my self-care massage.
It's so easy to tune out the abdomen. I also grew up with a sensitive digestive system, and I realized, at least in my body, it was just easier to ignore it than to tune into it. And I also had kind of an undiagnosed faulty gallbladder for about 19 years, and so just for me, going to my abdomen meant going to serious pain that was inescapable, and also kind of motivated me to be digging around in there and feel because I just felt like I wanted to rip it out, But yeah, it's amazing, the kind of relationship you can develop with your own body when you're not afraid of your viscera, right? When it's okay to start digging around in there and getting a sense of what's happening and how different it can feel when you eat something that your body is reacting to, or when things aren't working the way they should. So it sounds like you've had a similar cultivating a relationship with your gut that was, learning about yourself.
Yes, and I think I like the word you use of healthy curiosity. I think I've always used that in exploring my own body, and I encourage that for other people because I do know, I think sometimes culturally in the United States, assessing or accessing the belly or having the belly touched feels very vulnerable because there's no culture of abdominal massage.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think so many things, when I was a body worker, I did a lot with the gut as I was studying Chinese medicine at the time, and it always struck me how, first of all, how guarded people's abdomens can be. I think women especially of being embarrassed by having flesh on their bellies. I'm a victim of that as well. I feel like it has to look a certain way, but also just how much emotional material tends to hide there. If we were four-legged creatures, it would be our soft underbellies that would be guarded, that we, and emotionally, the tendency to have people have emotions or memories surface while having their abdomens worked on. It was amazing to me to see how much can live there and how readily people can kind of access it and let it go just by being in a safe space and having these places touched. That can be so cathartic.
Yeah, that emotional release to move the energy, we call it in Chinese medicine.
Yeah, do you see that in your practice and your work?
I do, yeah, and that was one of the things that, we're trained to also sort of hold space for through the Arvigo training are those armor bands, particularly they call the Reikian armor bands, of emotions that have not been expressed and have been held within the tissues for a long time. And so using touch, it sort of wakes up those nerve endings and those memories. And when the person is ready to release, even if they might not consciously feel like they're ready, that's when that catharsis may occur. And Rosita has this great saying that she uses about that. She says it's better an empty apartment than a bad tenant.
Nice.
So it's let it out. It's good. It's better that it's not there.
I like that.
Yeah.
So you touched on reasons why someone might seek out Arvigo Technique, right? You mentioned issues with the period, painful cycles, fertility. We just talked about emotions. What else is on that list?
So the one aspect that struck me, because I had a personal injury to my tailbone. When I was in second grade, I was in the back of a pickup truck, and this was in Central America on a really bad gravel road. And I was sitting around the metal part that goes over the tire, and the car went up and it came back down, and I came down onto that metal sitting, really hard.
That sounds awful.
It was so painful, and I did not tell my parents about it. I don't know why. And this is something that when I've told this story, many people say the same too. I didn't tell anybody. And immediately I noticed that I'd have to sit on the toilet and wait for a whole minute to urinate. Even though I felt like my bladder was full, it was like the nerve ending and the sphincter weren't relaxing enough. And so that led to not being able to sit in a chair in high school for more than like 20 minutes without feeling pain and discomfort.
Wow, that sounds awful, and such a structural injury that
Mm-hmm.
was leading to all of these functional problems,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just a kid, and you had no
I'm a
idea.
kid. I didn't know anything about
Oh,
my anatomy. I
yeah.
probably broke or deviated my tailbone. And it wasn't until I took the professional training of the Arvigo work that we all have to practice the body work on each other every day. And the person working on me said, the ligaments next to your tailbone feel really tight. And that's when like a light bulb came up. I was like, well, yeah, I had this injury way back and I've never really addressed it other than I had 2 chiropractic sessions when I was in high school, and that was 10 years before I knew of the Arvigo work. And so when my partner told me about this, I already learned the technique of how to assess the ligaments and the tension around my tailbone, so I was able to release a lot of that by myself.
Awesome.
And it led me to study more about my pelvic floor, which is not something that the Arvigo techniques delves into, but it's an intricate part of working with the pelvic organs is to understand, that pelvic support, that for women, it's the only muscles that hold the pelvic organs up. And there are muscles for safety, feelings of safety. They're involved with our deep breathing. They're involved with our urination and defecation and sexual pleasure. So all of that exploration for myself, that was like over several years, has really helped me be in my body more What's
More
the word?
comfortably, it
Yes.
sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, having this tailbone injury and those muscles being tight and sore for 20 years, I think, before I discovered how to release them.
That sounds like an incredible story of healing. So did that change? I mean, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
more comfortable with your body and more comfortable in your body and less pain. That's
Less pain, yep. And now I can relate that story to a lot of the students that take this self-care class. And it seems like half of the people I talk to, and if they fill out the intake form when they come in, have had a tailbone injury.
mm,
And Rosita would say when she was, actively treating families and children in Belize, she worked a lot with the Mennonite community in Belize. And in that tradition, it's not uncommon to have like 10 children. A woman can have about 10 children, and they do a lot of farm work and outside work. And so Rosita would tell them, if one of your girls, young girls, ever slips and falls or falls off a tree, come have her see me right away so I can work with the tailbone and facilitate that healing process a lot sooner for her so that reproductive organs wouldn't be affected by this fall, later on in life.
Oh, that sounds like amazing preventative medicine for anyone who's experienced that. And am I right that this is very different than chiropractic work, correct? It's not about thrusting and, like moving bones back into place.
Correct.
It seems like it's much more gentle than that.
Correct. It's more massage. And Rosita's background is in naprapathy, which there's a school in Chicago that she graduated from, and she calls it the PhD in massage, or PhD in body work. So she focuses a lot on teaching about the ligaments and the tendinous connections and the connective tissue. So yes, it's more like receiving a massage.
Nice. Mm-hmm. So when you prescribe self-massage for your patients and your clients for, let's say, a digestive issue, is there like maybe the cliff notes that you can give our listeners today if people are curious about things like gas and bloating are some of the most common complaints I get in my practice about what's going on digestively, or constipation or loose stool, certainly right up there. Is there maybe a basic routine that you could have people start to play with on their own?
Yeah, so with the palms of your hands going around your belly in a clockwise direction. So clockwise meaning if I'm looking at your belly, you'll be going from 12 o'clock to 3 to 6 to 9. That direction follows the movement of the food process from the small intestine and then through the large intestine. So that's one way to start.
And how much pressure should they be using?
So with the whole palm on the belly, it would be light. So you're mainly sort of facilitating lymph flow that way. So there's lymph on the skin, and then you're maybe putting a little bit more pressure in, but you're not necessarily like moving organs around.
Yeah, so we're thinking about massage on the level of thinking about the energy field that extends from the palms of our hands in through the belly. We don't actually have to be mashing internal organs around.
No.
It's like to still affect them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's one way to start. What I love to do is to review or teach people where the digestive organs are so that when they are going over the air, for example, the upper abdomen, when they're on their upper right-hand quadrant, they think of the liver and the gallbladder, and kind of making that connection for what those organs do for you also, I think, can be very healing, and then moving to the upper left side of the upper abdomen is stomach area, spleen, and pancreas. And then understanding the diaphragm, which is the breathing muscle, connects the rib cage. Going across there, just sort of that connection, I think then one brings the awareness there, and the area usually naturally relaxes as it tends to be tighter due to, stressors or shallow breathing, running around and not sitting down to eat, that kind of stuff.
All of that. And of course, in Chinese medicine, we connect the lungs and the large intestine. So when we're not breathing, we don't have that natural peristaltic urging from the lungs to the large intestine. And when the diaphragm gets stuck, we can perpetuate cycles of stress, which, is kind of like we get in the habit of breathing shallow, and then it's kind of like sitting all day, or, like having a muscle that is tight that absolutely needs to open up and move, that when we get diaphragm movement happening, so much ease can be created in the abdomen. So I love having people breathe into that, into their lower ribs, or to kind of like even just kind of hook their fingers underneath their rib cage and breathe into that in a way that might not be necessarily comfortable, but can help with the letting go there. People tend to like that one. And
you mentioned earlier about, the nervous system and the gut, and I was really amazed that most of the information, 90% of the information we take in, it's the belly that first perceives that, and then it goes up to the brain to be processed. And so what if the act of just, placing our hands on our bellies and doing a light rub at the end of each day is sort of like processing the day's, news and helping digest all that's happened? Because I think things are always coming into us and we're always doing things, but how much do we get to digest that and then, like you said, let go and then move things out? Right, of what's
digesting life, literally, right? Time to digest life, and recognizing too, I think so much of the time, just the value of being touched by a practitioner or being touched at all in a way that feels safe can bring our awareness to the fact that we're holding tension there. I'm sure that this is a familiar thing to many body workers, that clients comment, wow, I had no idea that was so tender until you touched it. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, we're sort of wired to tune out a lot of the stuff that's supposed to happen automatically. And part of that is the musculature and that, as you mentioned, armoring earlier. It's unconscious. And so if we take the time to consciously tune it back in with the breath, with the awareness, you're essentially doing Qigong on yourself as well as doing self-massage if you put your awareness in the belly and breathe. And it doesn't have to be complicated.
No, and sometimes doing it for ourselves feels safer than having someone else.
It's a really good point.
So that's another plus of having self-care tools. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you have shared some amazing gems with us, and if people want to stay in touch with you, how can they do that?
So my website is Armonia Health. And armonía means harmony in Spanish, since I have a bilingual practice. And so armonía is spelled ARMONIA, health, HEALTH.com. And my website has information on not just my practice, but the Arvigo Technique classes that I teach. So there's the one-day class that I teach, and there's a 2.5-day class. That's the self-care class, and they're open to the general public, as well as massage therapists and acupuncturists and midwives can get continuing education credits for those courses.
Awesome. So all of that, I will make sure finds its way into the show notes, which people can go visit at my website, brodywelch.com.
Great.
And under the podcast, they'll be able to find this episode and find all of that information. Leilon, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to share your experience and your wisdom with our listeners.
Thank you so much, Brody. This passed by really fast.
It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for having this show.
Thanks for listening today. For more episodes of A Healthy Curiosity, you can visit the iTunes store. If you appreciated today's show, please leave us a review. This helps other people to find the podcast. You could also head to brodywelch.com, where you can find free self-care resources, learn more about Chinese medicine, and let me know what you'd like to hear about on future episodes. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, be good to yourself.